to Cooking with Mrs.Murica. In today's episode, we are going to serve up a delicious bowl of revolution soup, which means we have to add our vital ingredients. Now, what we've been talking about is the big stick theory of government, and how for lots of time in the world, like, people ruled with the big stick. So whoever had the biggest, stick, or army or whatever, right last name, got to make the rules, and they got to enforce all the rules. But it's not like people just came over to the United States from all over, the world and then just said, okay, we're going to make our own country, we're going to have a democracy, here we go. I mean, no, that's not how it happened. They came from all these different places, they were colonized, there were natives living there, so they had their own governments that influenced the United States government. So there's really a lot going on. What we're talking about with revolution soup are the things that made the English colonists mad at the English monarchy, which would be King George. Now, not all of the people in the New World were from Great Britain, but this particular group of people were very influential as far as the forming of the United States government. So why would they risk their lives to separate from the United Kingdom and try to make something new? Well, there were a lot of things that really ticked them off. And that's what we are going to put into revolution soup. The first thing that goes into revolution soup, which we will signify with an onion, because, you gotta have onions in soup. That's just kind of the way it is. Cool. After the French and Indian War, there were colonists who were French, there were colonists who were British. They all sided with different Native American groups and they fought against each other because the Brits and the French have been at each other's throats for like thousands of years. So they decided, hey, let's go do it on some new soil. That sounds fun. So they came to the new country and they fought here. Well, after that was over, King George issued a proclamation, the Proclamation of 1763. And in that proclamation, he said, look, British colonists, you are way too expensive to keep safe, okay? And you're always going past the Appalachian Mountains. That is Native American territory. Just leave it alone, okay? Don't even look at it. He said, from now on, there's a boundary at the Appalachian Mountains, and I don't want you to go any farther than that line, okay? So he said, this is the line. It's the Appalachian Mountains. Proclamation of 1760. Don't go past that line, colonists, okay? Well, I don't know if you've spent any time with an American lately, but generally speaking, there are plenty of Americans who, if you tell them not to go past a line, that becomes the major focus of their life, is going past that line. They may not have even known that the line existed, but now they want to cross it. Oh, this line? This line right here? The Proclamation of 1763 made the colonists mad because the king was telling them what to do. Another thing that we can add to the soup, let's make this a potato. Okay, this potato isn't washed yet, but we'll just pretend that it is. Boom. A potato represents taxes. So King George was putting all these taxes on the colonists, and really not for bad reason. I mean, they were expensive. He needed to pay this army to help protect them. They were, putting ships back and forth. They had to set up all of this infrastructure. That's what taxes pay for. The colonists weren't necessarily mad about the taxes. They were mad about the taxes. No taxation without representation. So they were saying, we're not necessarily mad that you taxed us. We're mad that we didn't have a say about being taxed because the colonists had no representation in Parliament. Now, the Crown tried to tax the colonists in a lot of different ways, and you may have heard of some things like the Stamp Act. Each one of them was met with a lot of resistance. It just kind of stirred them up. Well, like, ooh, you're going to try a different tax now? Stirred them up. So they're just getting like more and more angry about this, okay? Next thing that goes into the revolution soup. Throw this in there. Looks like cucumber. I don't think you're supposed to put those in soup. That's all right. Next thing that goes into revolution soup. Chapa. The colonists were mad because the Crown didn't want them to form their own militias or store up ammunitions and guns for themselves. The Crown was very skeptical about why the colonists would need to have you know, guns and ammo and form militias to be patrolling their own neighborhoods. The crown was like, no. We'll have the redcoats do that, okay? You guys don't need to be doing that. We'll do that ourselves. So they didn't want the people stockpiling weapons. See Second Amendment when we get to the Bill of Rights, okay? That goes into the soup. Another thing that goes into the soup, little thing called the Boston Massacre. So there were a bunch of youths, and they were making fun of redcoats, and they were like, oh, you lobster, you know, probably talking bad about their mom or whatever. So they kept doing their thing and getting all riled up and getting in the British officers' faces. Well, eventually, the redcoats opened fire on the crowd, and they killed 5 people. Not exactly like a massacre, although any life lost, you know, ever is a tragedy. But it was turned into propaganda, right? Like, look at what the bloodthirsty British redcoats are doing, how they're treating us. And that's the kind of bias that went out to all the colonies about this event that had happened. So that went into the soup. And that's all getting stirred up, right? So now we have all these different things that are making us mad. Okay, what else we got here? This kitchen. All right, next thing goes into the soup. You may have heard of a little thing called the Boston Tea Party. The Crown decided that they were gonna put a tax on tea, and guess what? The colonists didn't like that. That made them really angry. So they were like, hey, you want to put a tax on the tea? How about we dress up like Native Americans, storm onto a ship, and dump all your tea into the Boston Harbor? I mean, we're not talking just like, you know, like take out a thing and like, oh, there's tea. No, it was like millions of dollars in today's money worth of tea that they dumped into the Boston Harbor. And that just got psyched up like, oh, did you hear what they did? Oh, no, they didn't. You know, that kind of attitude. So that goes into the pot. Boom. Boston Tea Party. Very, very exciting. All right, next thing goes into the soup. Colonists wrote the king a letter, and they said, here, there are some things that we can do to make peace. All right, here is the olive branch petition. We're gonna send out an olive branch to you, king. Here's some things that we would like to see happen. We think we could still make this work. And the king was like, so, add it to the pot. The next thing is really the last straw that pushed the colonies into complete war. And that's the battles of Lexington and Concord. This really famous story, you know, Paul Revere running through the countryside. The redcoats are coming, the redcoats are coming. Because they were trying to go to these places and take away their ammunitions, take away their guns and their ammo that they knew that they were stockpiling. We don't need to get into the nitty-gritty of the battles of Lexington and Concord, except to say that the redcoats were trying to take the guns, and the colonists didn't want to give up their guns. And it ended in the very first shots of the Revolutionary War being fired, the battles of Lexington and Concord. So we'll put that into our soup. Give it a little pumpkin flavor. Boom. So all this stuff goes in. I mean, there's lots more, okay? There's lots more. Those are some of the more famous things that the colonists were angry about with the throne, with the big stick theory. Whatever I say goes. And they're like, oh, whatever I say goes. Watch this. Boom. American Revolution. Okay? Well, it still had to be fought. And I mean, you think about it, it's like, this is this little group of peon peasants versus the crown, versus England, as in the largest naval force in the world. So it didn't look too great for the colonists. But looking back, hindsight is 2020. I don't know if you knew this, but they won the war. The colonists, I mean. So. But here's the kicker. All of that stuff got them hyped up. Pushed them towards war, fought the war, they won the war. Now what? Now what? Now we got a country to build. So now we have to start some serious construction project to get ourselves up and running. And that's what we will talk about next.